Writing first appears in the ancient Near East around the end of the 4th millennium BCE, more precisely around 3300 BCE. The earliest evidence is from the town of Uruk in southern Mesopotamia, known in the Bible as Erech. This writing is referred to as cuneiform, or wedge-shaped writing. Originally, the scribes drew pictures on clay tablets with a reed stylus carved to a point at the end. Later, to facilitate more facile writing, the reed stylus was carved to a prism shape. The edge of the prism could be stuck into the clay, producing the wedge-shaped writing. Shortly after the invention of writing in Mesopotamia, the Egyptians borrowed the idea and began fashioning images in a variety of media. Both Mesopotamian cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphic writing was pictographic. Each image stood for the object depicted by the image, or an idea associated with that object. Shortly thereafter, it was discovered that one could use these pictographs phonetically. That is, you could use the image to simply represent the sound that you make when pronouncing the word associated with the image. It's like a rebus. I can draw a picture of an I, then use that picture to represent that first-person pronoun I, as in, I love you. It has nothing to do with an I. It is simply the representation of a sound. However, at this stage in the history of writing, the phonetic values of these symbols were in the form of syllables. Each symbol or sign represented a syllable. There was no alphabet. Things began to get interesting when, in 1904, a British archaeologist, Sir Flinders Petrie, discovered the remains of an Egyptian turquoise mining town in west-central Sinai known as Serabat el-Khadim. The remains are dated to the Middle Egyptian Kingdom and included the remains of a temple dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Hathor, as well as numerous inscriptions written in Egyptian hieroglyphics. In addition, however, a number of inscriptions were discovered in an otherwise unknown script. These inscriptions have come to be known as the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions. Proto, because it wasn't clear if these symbols were modified Egyptian hieroglyphics or some new system of writing. However, as this chart shows, scholars were able eventually to connect these symbols with alphabetic writing that appeared in subsequent periods. The move to an alphabet was actually rather simple. You can take a symbol representing an object and use it phonetically, like with cuneiform. However, you can also use it to represent only the first sound that you make when you say the word represented by the symbol. Take, for instance, the first image on the chart, the ox head. A word for ox in Hebrew is elef, or aleph. The first Hebrew letter of that word is the Hebrew letter aleph. And so you get in Phoenician inscriptions, and as we'll see, also early Hebrew inscriptions, the symbol for the Hebrew letter aleph. Or go halfway down to the Mem. You'll see an image of water. In Hebrew, water is mayim, or sometimes just main. So you have the Hebrew letter Mem. If you apply this method of interpreting these sounds, you can read this inscription, beginning at the upper left and moving to the lower right, as Mot LaBaalat, perhaps meaning something like the death of the Canaanite goddess Baalat, the female counterpart to the Canaanite god Baal. Her death might have been part of some sort of fertility myth, like the death of Persephone in Greek mythology. While we are accustomed to reading Hebrew from right to left, we're going to see that the direction of writing was rather arbitrary and only eventually became standardized. Now we're going to look at 3 Hebrew inscriptions covering roughly the 11th through 10th centuries BCE, the period of Israel's early settlement during the days of the Judges. It's interesting to note that all 3 of these examples come from archaeological sites located in the Shfela region of Israel. This piece is called an ostrakon. When you or I accidentally break a clay pot, we simply throw it away. In ancient times, potsherds were valuable commodities. You could write on them. A potsherd with writing on it is called an ostrakon. This ostrakon has been incised with what looks like an early so-called abecedary, an alphabet. The image on the upper left is an actual photograph of the ostrakon, while the lower image is some sort of enhanced photo. On the upper right, you see a hand drawing of the symbols. We can detect most of the signs, moving from right to left, that we saw on the alphabet chart displayed in connection with the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions. Beginning on the right, we see Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled. Then we see Vav He, the reverse of what we know of the Hebrew alphabet. Clearly, the order had also not yet become standardized. We see the same phenomenon as we move left. After He, we have Chet, Zayin, Tet, Yod, Lamed, Kaf, Mem, Nun, Samech. The top part of this ostrakon is almost totally worn and is virtually impossible to read. However, we see another abecedary at the bottom, this time going from left to right. It looks like Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, He, Chet, Tet. Then, I must admit, I lose it. But I have to admit, this is my favorite, the Gezer calendar. We're going to spend a bit of time deciphering this little gem. See if you can identify any of the letters on the tablet. See if you can find this letter on the chart. It's a Yod. Now this letter. It's a Resh. Now this letter. It's a Chet. So what does it say? That's the word Yerach, or Yareach. You might remember this word from this bedtime story. Laila Tov Yareach. Good night, moon. It means moon, but it can also mean month. You might have noticed that the writing on the tablet was a bit crude. The letters were neatly formed, incised into the stone, but it wasn't well ruled. The letters didn't line up. Most scholars think this might have been a school child's exercise tablet, inscribed with a poem describing the agricultural calendar. It's a lot like the little ditty we learned as kids, 30 days, hath September, etc. The city of Samaria was founded by King Omri of Israel and was lavishly built by him and his son Ahab. A beautiful palace has been discovered there, adorned with beautiful Phoenician ivories from the 9th and 8th centuries BCE. About 30 ostraca, plural of ostrakon, have been discovered there, written in a cursive form of the alphabet that we've examined, using ink applied with a reed pen frayed at the end to hold the ink. Here's one ostrakon. See if you can pick out some of the letters. Here's what it says. The Samaria ostraca are mainly economic documents, receipts and bills of lading. This was a period of great prosperity in the northern kingdom of Israel. but also one of great economic disparity, as we learn from the prophets Hosea and Amos. You'll note the person receiving this jar of oil is a person named Gadia, or Gadiah. The Yao part is a shortened form of the divine name Yahweh, sort of like the name of the current Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu. The Yahu part is a shortened form of Yahweh. Several of the personal names in these documents are formed with the divine name Baal, indicating the continued Canaanite influence in the region. It was specifically this Canaanite influence that formed the background of the conflict between the prophet Elijah and King Ahab, who was married to a Phoenician Canaanite princess, Jezebel. This material was discussed in Lecture 4 in connection with the issue of the worship of the Queen of Heaven. There we noted that the Queen of Heaven could have been associated with the Canaanite goddess Asherah, perhaps depicted as the sacred tree in this decoration on a jar from the site of Kuntilat Ajrud. There we noted a reference to Yahweh of Teman and his Asherah inscribed on this jar. See if you can make out any of the letters or words in this part of the inscription. Reading from right to left, take a look at the last two letters of the first line inside the box and the first three letters of the next line. It reads LeYahweh, to Yahweh. We've been taught that we're not allowed to write this name, but here it is written. Here's a transcription. You can see the word Asherato, his Asherah, in line 3. And here's a translation. So we see that by the 9th century BCE, we have evidence of an increase of writing in ancient Israel. I would suggest that this increase in writing actively accelerated late in the 8th century BCE and gained momentum in the days of Jeremiah, which may be behind the reference to the scrolls in the book of Jeremiah. What we see here are the so-called Lamelech jar handles from the late 8th century BCE. Many scholars believe that these are related to an effort to supply the royal city, Jerusalem, with commodities in preparation for the invasion of the Assyrian king Sennacherib in 701 BCE during the reign of King Hezekiah of Judah. These seals on jar handles all say Lamelech, to the king, with the name of the place of origin, Meshet, unknown, Hebron, and Soko. Here's another example of the use of writing from the late 8th century BCE. This inscription, now held in the museum in Istanbul, was discovered in the late 19th century in the so-called Siloam Tunnel. According to the Bible, King Hezekiah built this tunnel in preparation for Sennacherib's invasion. Let's take a bit of time to try to decipher some of this inscription. Again, we're reading from right to left, and you might recall that a single word may flow over into a next line. See if you can make out these letters. Shalosh, 3. How about this? Kof Lamed. Kof Lamed, Aleph, Aleph, Lamed, Resh, Ayin, Vav, Kol Ish Kara El Re'av. Each man called to his neighbor. Now, how about this? Hey, mem, yod, mem. Hamayim, the water. Here's what it says. The stonecutters started at the two ends of the tunnel, shouting to each other in order to make the two ends meet. By building the tunnel, Hezekiah brought the waters of the Gihon spring, located southeast of the city, inside the walls of the city. He then stopped up the spring, depriving the invading army of water, but providing it to the people inside the walls of the city. A masterful piece of ancient engineering. We now move into the late 7th and early 6th centuries BCE, the period contemporaneous with Jeremiah. This is the famous Baruch seal that I mentioned in the lecture. This seal is made out of clay. Many of the seals were made of stone. These seals have been discovered all over Israel, dating from this period. They are inscribed with a personal name indicating ownership. It appears that they were used to seal documents, just like the deed mentioned in Jeremiah 32. Many of these documents were papyrus documents, since traces of papyrus have been discovered on many of the seal impressions. Also accompanying many seal impressions are traces of twine that may have been used to tie a papyrus scroll. A papyrus scroll would have been rolled and tied with a piece of twine. Where the twine was knotted, the seal would be applied to guarantee the privacy of the document. It probably should be read. Never mind. Sorry, start over. Also from the time of Jeremiah are more than 100 ostraca found at the eastern Negev site of Arad. 18 of these documents involve a fellow named Eliashib, who seems to have been an administrator or military officer in the town. It is clear that the documents, in the form of letters, describe political and military affairs involving the Babylonian conquest of the kingdom of Judah. Here's a photograph and a facsimile of one of these ostraca. Again, we're reading from right to left. The piece on the right is the obverse of the ostracon, the front side, while the piece on the left is the reverse. See if you can make out any letters or words. How about this word? Eliashib, to Eliashib, or just Eliashib. How about this word? It's a bit difficult to read. Melech, king. Here's a challenge. Give it a try. Elisha ben Yirmiyahu. Elisha, son of Jeremiah. Unlikely our Jeremiah. Here's the full text of the letter. It seems that the writer is asking for a transfer of troops to the town of Ramat Negev to fortify it against a possible assault by the Edomites, a nation situated southeast of the Dead Sea. There are a number of references to Edom in the book of Jeremiah. For instance, Edom is mentioned as part of what appears to be an anti-Babylonian delegation that came to King Zedekiah of Judah as described in Jeremiah 27. Yet Jeremiah curses Edom in chapter 49. It may be that Edom was trying to play both sides of this conflict, but ended up being hostile to Judah. A similar situation appears in the town of Lachish in the Shephelah. Some 35 ostraca have been discovered, also from the time of Jeremiah, and also involving political and military activities related to the Babylonian conquest. Here again we see a photograph on the right and a facsimile on the left. The obverse of the ostracon is on top and the reverse below. See if you can identify some of the letters or words. Here's a phrase that may surprise you. Yishma Yahweh, or Yashma Yahweh, may Yahweh cause to hear. Again, with the name of Yahweh spelled out. Try this one. El Mas'at Lachish, for the fire signal of Lachish. Here's the full text. Apparently, the writer of the letter is relaying some information that is difficult to follow, since we're just hearing one piece of what might have been an ongoing correspondence. However, it is clear that the writer is concerned with the fate of the town of Azekah and is waiting for some kind of signal from Lachish. So what we see in this presentation is that the practice of writing seems to have developed slowly in ancient Israel, beginning around the 11th century. However, this activity picked up in the 8th century, but by the 7th century, writing was quite ubiquitous, and there is serious evidence for the practice of writing scrolls on papyrus, scrolls that may have been very much like the one dictated by Jeremiah to his scribe Baruch.